Beautiful. So I'm here with Sophia Rose, who actually I have been a long-term fan of your work. Sophia, I joined Garden Party. I'm going to say it could be going on for 10 years ago. Could that be possible? Like maybe 8 years. Like it was when you first launched it at the very beginning. So it's been a while.
Yeah, it was a while ago, not quite 10 years, but time is funny like that. And I'm
Yeah.
so just delighted to hear that you've enjoyed that. And it's wonderful to connect with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. So I see you as a real pioneer in the world of herbalism and natural medicine. And I mean, there's so many things that I appreciate about your work, but one of the things I really appreciate deeply is that you, from my perception at least, are a woman who really walks your own path. Like it seems to me that you're not necessarily that interested in what is trending or what people think might be popular. You're very much on your own trajectory. And that is fascinating to me because I feel that so many women struggle with that. We struggle to have the confidence to really choose our own path and stay true to that inner calling. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what that looks like and feels like for you in your journey.
Thank you so much. I feel so seen. Yeah, I have definitely always forged my own path from a very young age. I never took a traditional path in school or in my career. And, growing up, I think like we become who we are both because of and in spite of our upbringing, right? And I think I had the strange blessing to be just like I really parented myself growing up. And so I had the opportunity to really become my own person from a young age and finished high school very early, ended up pursuing herbalism at a young age. And as I've progressed, I find myself very much at the intersection of all these different worlds. Like I do identify as an herbalist, but I think especially right now I'm kind of trying to figure out what that looks like and what that means for who I am, because it's never really worked for me to just fit into one box. And so I feel really excited right now to be at this intersection of herbalism and sexual wellness and homesteading, and really trying to bring to life for people in a very embodied way how all of those things are not separate and how they're like deeply, deeply interwoven. So yeah, thank you so much for seeing that in me. And I think when we are in our own lives, we can't imagine it any other way.
Yeah, it's interesting that whole kind of self-parenting element because like you, I also left home really young and was very independent from a very young age. And I think there are certain qualities, and actually now that you've shared that, I didn't know that about you before, I can see the resonance there and why I'm so drawn to you and your work. There are certain qualities that come through, especially for a woman that has to forge her way from fairly young. And some of those qualities are beautiful: independence, a sense of a sort of robust sense of capability. But then some of them can be a little bit wounded as well. Like I feel like, I mean, to speak about myself, sometimes I can be overly independent. And it's kind of that thing of like, I'm not going to let anyone do it for me because I don't trust that someone else will do it for me. So I don't know if you can relate to that, but that pathway of young independence as a woman is both a blessing and a curse, I think.
I totally agree. And I think I don't know how old you are. I'm 33. And I'm at an age right now where I am starting to see the ways in which that has really served me and the ways in which I want to shift that to be more receptive. And it's been so cool because I actually have my rose petal elixir here with me since you and I chatted briefly about that. And, you know, I've been working with a lot of the same plants for over a decade now and even longer. And I love that we share our middle name, Rose. Um, and just in the same way that like our relationships with people can evolve over time, our relationships with plants can evolve. And I have found plant medicine to be so profound for shifting exactly what you're talking about and becoming more receptive, leaning more into that positive state of softness and surrender and femininity that I think we all really crave and that can feel intensely vulnerable.
So beautiful. So before we talk specifically about the rose elixir, let's talk about herbal medicine in general and your calling to that. Like, it sounds like you had a very strong calling to plant allies from a very young age. Like, what was that pathway like for you?
Yeah. So, from a young age, I was always questioning everything. I was like, where does our water come from? Where does our food come from? I had this very primal sense of like the way we're living is really odd, and I felt that in a very deep way from a young age. And so, I remember when I was like 8 or 9 years old, I found this book that maybe called Living on Earth by Alicia Bay Laurel. Are you
No?
familiar with that? Well, I think you would love it. It's this very iconic, beautiful, hand-drawn, illustrated book from the late 60s, early 70s.
Oh, I already love it.
Yeah, you've got to check it out. And Alicia Bay Laurel is the woman who compiled that and made it. And I found my mom's copy when I was like 8 years old. It was held together with a rubber band, like just falling apart. And it just goes over how to grow your own food, how to make your own clothes, how to make your own shelter. And it blew my little mind. And it became like my Bible. And so, I've always had that from a young age. And as a teenager, became really involved in practicing yoga and just kind of went from one thing to the next. And I think when you're young and like you and I were both saying, like kind of when you have this freedom for better or worse, and the blessing of naivete, you just follow that thread in a really like uninterrupted way. So I when I was younger, I would say like I would have marching orders from the universe, and I just kind of like always felt like I knew the next step. And so I had studied yoga, I had studied like natural cooking, and I just wanted to go to herb school. And I was living in Boulder, Colorado at the time. Didn't even research herb schools, in my naive state. And so I just went to herb school where I was in Boulder, Colorado, and I got very, very lucky to attend an amazing program called the North American Institute of Medical Herbalism, which is now the Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism. And that was just a beautiful blend of clinical skills and folk tradition. And also, our teachers really empowered us to build a direct relationship with the plants. And more than that, with the wild places where the plants grow. And so I think, like so many people, I was initially drawn to herbalism thinking, oh, I want to know what plants to use for what ailments, just in a very like allopathic way. And what I got was so much deeper. That choice to go to herb school really completely shifted my life and set me on a wildly different path, where I realized that plants are these incredible, incredible ancient wise teachers. And they are so much more than just their constituents or just use this plant when you have this illness. And I really started to understand plants and also the ecosystems in which they grow as these like incredibly rich multidimensional beings and spirits that I could interface with in a very real way. So that's a little bit of what led me to the path that I'm on now.
So tell us a little bit about what that means to interface and interact with a plant over time. And you said that some of the medicinal plants that you're working with, you've had a relationship with for many years. And I love that so much, because it's just the antithesis of like, oh, I have a sore throat, so I'm going to walk into the health food store and buy myself a tincture of echinacea. In the same way that we might, buy some Panadol if we have a headache. But you're describing actually an interactive symbiotic relationship that has sustained over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just take let's see. Do you want to say more?
Yeah, sure.
I would love to respond.
I'm interested because I'm thinking about women who are listening who perhaps use herbal medicine but don't really have that sense of connection to the plant that the medicine has come from. So it's sort of like, we're so conditioned in our Western culture that there's a problem and there's a remedy, right? This is very much our kind of Western thinking. And it's like, what's the solution? And one of my teachers, Kaya Minderlin, who is a yoga teacher and a great philosopher, talks about walking around the subject to find the solution. And I love this idea that rather than just like, tell me what the answer is, you know, we walk around something and we are in relationship with it in order to get curious, and then wellness can kind of evolve from that place. And I think, you know, whilst many people might understand that, to then make the connection with that in terms of herbal medicine and plant allies might be a new way of thinking for many of the listeners. So I'm interested to hear your perspective on that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's so helpful. So think about it this way. If you had a friend and you only went to that friend anytime you needed something, how long would that friendship last, and how satisfying would that be for either of you? You want to nurture your friendships, your relationships. You want it to be you want there to be reciprocity. You want there to be depth. You don't just want it to be transactional. And I think of plants in the same way. You know, for example, when I lived in Colorado and went to that herb school, I was in deep relationship with a plant called hawthorn, which is a tree that actually grows in many places around the world. There's a variety of species, and it's in the rose family. And so it produces little tiny berries similar to rose hips and apples, and it has flowers, and it has these huge thorns. And I would go to this hawthorn grove and just spend time there and just really immerse myself in that environment and be in relationship. And that is what I was taught is called first medicine, is just being with a plant, you know. And I work with plants in a really energetic way. So often I'm not necessarily treating someone with a sore throat, but more likely like a broken heart, or, you know, more of an emotional, spiritual imbalance. And I think plants excel in helping us to come back to ourselves in that way. And a lot of the time, you don't even need to take the tincture or drink the tea or have the salve. You can really just go and be with a plant. And the more you do that and the more you tend to that relationship, the deeper that becomes. And a beautiful example of that is, you know, I've been cultivating this relationship with the hawthorn since, you know, for 12, 13, 14 years, however long that's been. And I live in a beautiful home in northern New Mexico now. And when I first came to this property, I walked into the house and I thought, oh gosh, this house is too nice for me. I could never live here. It wasn't a conscious thought, but that was my gut reaction. And then I was walking around the property and I saw these 3 really majestic hawthorn trees. And I just thought, I've got to get out of my own way. Like, I am supposed to be here. There is a deeper medicine calling me here. And so plants will call to us in that way. And, you know, circling back to your question of how do we be in relationship with plants as these more multidimensional rather than, you know, objects, multidimensional beings rather than objects, the medicine you need is usually growing right outside your door. You are a part of the ecosystem where you live. And, you know, I think in a time when people are so hungry, like you said, for solutions, the answer is often so much more simple than we allow ourselves to imagine. And the medicines that most people need are very common, very abundant, and are typically growing, you know, within a mile of their home. And so if anybody is curious to explore that relationship, I would invite them to just go for a walk and see what plants call to them. And even if you don't know the names, you know, you don't even have to know what the plant is. You can really just spend time with it. And then you may learn the name and learn some of what it is used for, and then realize how relevant it is to your life. And I find that to just be so incredible, the way that the medicine we need will always find us persistently. So, yeah.
Literally, as you said, just getting out of our own way. It reminds me of one of the beautiful yogic teachings about Sanskrit mantra, which says, you don't need to understand the meaning of the mantra. You just need to recite it enough times that the meaning reveals itself to you. And, you know, as we sit with a particular plant ally, we have the opportunity to have the medicine revealed to us. And I love the idea that it doesn't even need to be through imbibing. It could literally just be through presence. As you were talking then, I was remembering, because I grew up in the UK in the countryside, there was so much hawthorn. It was prolific. It's such a beautiful plant. Like the flowers are so delicate, and then this really, like you said, full on thorns. So it's kind of a very, like, there's a lot of paradox in that plant, I think. Can you tell us a little bit about the medicine of hawthorn? What is the medicine of hawthorn?
Oh, I love to talk about hawthorn. And that was just so beautifully expressed. I want to say, just in regards to the mantra, I'm really taking that in. Yeah, so I always hesitate to say, this is the medicine of this plant, because, as we've already established, plants are such vast beings, just in the same way that you aren't, just sharing about yoga. You have so many other things that you do and that you are. But hawthorn, as I think of it, is most strikingly a medicine for the heart, and both the physical heart and the spiritual heart. Whew, I feel a little overcome talking about it all of a sudden. Hawthorn is such a relevant medicine for our times. It is a medicine for long-standing, persistent grief. And we are just, as a species, so in that field, and we can dip in and out of it, but it wears on us. It's heavy, where, even if we have an immense amount of privilege and beauty in our lives, we can still feel just the deep suffering that is happening in the world, particularly as this conversation is happening. And so hawthorn is a really helpful ally for staying in touch with your emotions and not letting them get stuck, letting that grief flow through you, letting yourself be a conduit for it, but not being overtaken by it. I'm also on the autism spectrum, which is something I realized pretty late in life about myself, and it kind of made all these pieces click. And hawthorn is an amazing medicine for anyone who is incredibly sensitive, whether or not you are neurodivergent. But it helps to ground the spirit in the body and to focus your energy and attention. So, I think one of the things that grief can do to us is it can manifest as anxiety, and it can manifest as brain fog and lack of focus. And hawthorn really helps you to gather all of the disparate parts of your spirit that are kind of like out doing other things, thinking about other things, back into the moment, into your body, so that you can be deeply present where you are. Hawthorn is also a tree that in many cultures where it's revered is thought of as a door to the other world. So like the world of spirits or the world of fae. And what is that? Rip Van Winkle. Do you know that story about the man who falls asleep under the tree and wakes up like 2,000 years later? And everyone he knows is, I think that was a hawthorn tree, because it really is this it's this doorway into timelessness, right? And it really helps us access that sense of timelessness within ourselves and within our nervous systems. So it's a nervine, meaning it helps us to shift from a sympathetic state of fight or flight into a parasympathetic state of relaxation. And all of the medicines I make, all of the medicines I work with, because I am so sensitive, I'm often coming from that place of, okay, how do we downregulate our nervous systems? Because when we do that, healing can happen, and we almost don't even need a more specific medicine for it, if that makes sense. So
makes total sense. And I'm interested in that time looping quality, because one of the things I've been speaking about in my own work a lot recently, and thinking about in myself too, is this idea that healing can happen in a timeline that isn't necessarily logical. Like we think if we've, for example, been holding trauma for a long time, that the healing process therefore has to take a long time. And what I've started to really tap into recently in my sort of thinking and my observations as well of working with other women is we can short circuit that. We don't actually have to take years and years and years on a healing path. I mean, sometimes the path is slow and winding, and that's okay. But there's also an opportunity for us to go, you know what, I'm done with this particular story. I'm done with this particular piece of baggage. It's time now. And for that to happen quite quickly, quite surprisingly. And it sounds like hawthorn might be an ally that can help us with those kind of time loops and that navigation of time around healing.
I love that. Yeah, I imagine that it would be really powerful in that way.
Oh, so beautiful. Let's talk about rose. Let's talk about your beautiful rose elixir and the journey of your journey with rose and the creation with rose.
Yeah. So I have it here. I'm going to take a few drops. I wish I could give you a few drops as well, and everyone who's listening. But, if you are listening, and I would invite you as well, maybe just close your eyes for a minute and take a deep breath and call to mind the last time you saw a rose and what it made you feel and any associations you may have with it. And imagine it's there in front of you and just take it in every way. So similar to hawthorn, they're very similar because they're related, and I love plants that have that juxtaposition of the soft, beautiful, open, very sensual blooms, and then this powerful protection provided by the thorns. And I think that especially as women, that is the polarity that we are holding inside ourselves at all times, is knowing when to be soft and open and receptive, and when to use discernment and have boundaries. And I think that it is that tension, for lack of a better word, between those two things that is what allows us to really be soft and open, is knowing that we have the option to protect ourselves, knowing that we have the agency to say yes or say no. So I think of plants in a very metaphorical way, as you can probably tell. I really think of them through this poetic, mythopoetic lens, really. And in that way, I think that we have a much deeper ability as humans to learn about plants directly than most people realize. Like if you saw a rose, you could probably intuit that just looking at it, right? You can see the literal sharpness and the literal softness right next to each other, and imagine what that might do within you as well. So my particular journey with the rose, that is my name, Sophia Rose, one of the best gifts I was given, I feel. I absolutely feel that my name is such a gift. So anyways, when I was in herb school, I was making a lot of medicine at that time. And I started a jar of rose petal elixir under my bathroom cabinet at the time. I was living in the mountains in Colorado, and I think it was, maybe a 36-ounce jar or something, not very much. And I had a friend who just said, "What are you going to do with that much rose elixir?" I said, "I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to make it." And that was in probably, 2010. And, 13 years later, I'm still making this medicine. I've made probably thousands and thousands of bottles that people have enjoyed over the world. And I think of rose as this medicine that really just brings us back to neutral within ourselves, so that we can see clearly where we are rather than projecting onto the situation, so that we can be receptive to the gifts of the moment, and so that we can be discerning about who and what we let into our lives. That little jar of rose elixir, I went on to go on quite a journey after I ended herb school, and I ended up selling those little bottles of rose elixir mostly outside of a biker bar on this little tiny island in the middle of Lake Superior. And you think about bikers, right? And they're all tough and they're all masculine, and they're craving that polarity of softness, and they love this rose petal elixir. So it's not just for women. And I think
love that image. That's just so cool.
pretty funny. It was pretty funny. So, I still like to joke about that with that friend to this day. I found something to do with that jar of rose petal elixir.
It went exactly where it needed to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that polarity, the masculine and the feminine, which obviously resides within all of us. I mean, the image of the bikies taking the rose elixir is a very tangible image of masculine meets feminine. But I think, for us as women, to put it in very simplistic terms, I feel that so often we're having to step into the masculine or we think we have to step into the masculine to assert boundary. And what you're describing is another path, another way that we can have clarity around our boundaries, that we can be really strong in ourselves without having to become overly identified with masculine energetics. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it's something I have been thinking about so much lately. It's wonderful to be having this conversation with you now, especially even as my relationship specifically to the rose petal elixir is shifting in this way and really helping me to be more receptive, be more surrendered, let myself be led by the masculine energies in my life. And yeah, to release control in this way that I hadn't even recognized I was trying to have control. And so this is a medicine that I have been working with a lot more again lately with this new perspective of, okay, how can I soften? How can I soften? How can I soften into my power? And what is it for me to actually be in my power? Because I think so many women, myself included, don't actually have a real sense of what their power is. And for me, in the last, just even the last couple of months, I have just my relationship with my physical body has shifted dramatically. And I have really rooted into myself in this new way where I am recognizing my feminine power. And my feminine power lies in my presence and my stillness and my ability to be magnetic and to receive rather than to go seek. And I think the rose is just a very profound medicine for starting to access that that embodied state within yourself.
Mm. It's so interesting. I mean, even just to give a very sort of somewhat superficial example with the presenters for this summit, this is the 4th year that this summit has run. And in previous years, it's been very much a process of me deciding who I want to present and kind of reaching out and, curating, let's say, the list of presenters, which is beautiful in its own way. But this year, for the 4th round, actually really took a different approach. And it was much more about me sitting in deep meditation, sitting in the center of my sense of what it was I wanted to hold energy for. And then I almost feel like I received the download of who the presenters were to be. And when I started reaching out to people, it was that word magnetic comes to mind. It was much more of a just the right women for this particular container just dropped. It just all dropped into place. So whereas before, often in my work, and I think this is, many women, many people have this experience, it's about there's a grasping energy. There's an energy of like, I need to create and hold and contain. And yet there can be so much power and presence in that magnetic receptive energy of I am available. I'm making available space and let's see what drops into that space. Yeah, I don't know if I'm articulating that particularly well, but it was a very, very different energetic feeling. And I'm sure that will come through in the summit. I'm sure that will come through in the conversations because the whole tonality around it is very different.
Well, I felt that deeply in the invitation, and just even in the voice note you sent me. So I want to reflect that back to you. And, I actually have not done a podcast or an interview or anything for like 4 years. I've just said no to everything. And I could feel that. I could feel that in your field. And it was really easy to say yes to, and just a pleasure to say yes.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so lovely to hear. I have one last question for you, which is something I'm going to be asking everybody because I think that the listeners are so interested and I'm always curious. What is it that you are working on, learning about, reading about at the moment? Like what's exciting for you right now? It could be in the work of herbalism, but it could be in some other area as well.
Yeah, thank you. I love that question. I'll share 2 things, one of which people who know me probably are already aware of, which is I'm really excited right now to be homesteading and raising my own animals and meat. And specifically, I'm in a deep relationship with rabbits right now. And I'm learning so much about fertility and femininity and motherhood from them, and just like watching my does give birth and then raising their kits and then even dispatching them, which, means butchering and processing them. Like, I just feel so deeply in touch with the erotic nature of the cycle of nourishment and the cycle of life in this way that is really profound. So I'll share that. And then, we're having this conversation about feminine energy and polarity. And that's also something I've been exploring in a new way this summer. I have been, I've been reading some books that I've just had to sort of like giggle at the title of. I read this book this summer called The Surrendered Single: How to Attract and Marry the Man That's Right for You. And I was just like, oh my God, no one can see me reading this book. The principles that she shares in it are so powerful. Not even about attracting a relationship or a partner, but just about being in relationship with yourself in this really, really deep way that I thought I knew, but I did not know. So I would like to start getting a commission for all of the books that I am selling for Laura Doyle. No, I'm just teasing. But every one of my girlfriends, I'm like, you've got to read this. So that book has actually been really profound for me. And it actually has shifted my relationship with my femininity, my body, and with the plants. So, cheesy title aside, I highly recommend Laura Doyle's books.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. It's so I feel like we could chat for a very long time. I'm really there's so much potency in just this short conversation. So thank you for being here with me today.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and just absolutely a delight.